You're listening to the Jefferson Exchange. Thanks for joining us. The JX starts today with the debrief, where JPR reporters discuss the stories they've been covering this week, including changes at a Douglas County Transportation District, ongoing drama between the county and library in Josephine County, and planned updates at the airport in Medford. I'm Maria Carter, JPR's news director.
I'm Emma J. Nelson, JPR's intern for the summer.
I'm Roman Battaglia, science, environment, and politics reporter.
And I'm Justin Higginbottom, public health and safety reporter.
Roman, you've got a fresh update on the Grants Pass Library building. Tell us what's going on there.
Yes. So for those who don't know and have not been following all of the drama that's been going on, back in January, the commissioners in Josephine County terminated their lease with the library district for the Grants Pass Library, which they lease out to the library district. They technically gave the library 30 days before the end of the lease, but they didn't actually end up kicking out the library. They said it was to renegotiate this lease and get a better deal for the county. And there's a lot of drama around this. That was part of this library stuff, and complaining about this district was part of the reason one of the commissioners got recalled last year. But it's taken months to do all of this negotiation. They've been working on it back and forth with lawyers and stuff, and they finally came up with this negotiated lease that everyone had agreed with, or at least both sides. And then commissioners had been considering it on Thursday during the meeting, which is what I tuned into.
So tell us what happened at that meeting.
Yeah, so it's already taken a while for this specific lease to even be agreed to. I mean, it took them 2 weeks. The commissioners looked at it last week. They listened to public comment, and then one of the commissioners, the board chair, Andreas Bleck, said he had an appointment and had to table the meeting and hold it till later. And then everyone kind of got mad at him because a lot of people came up and said, we really want this to get over with, like just sign this lease. Everyone likes it. It's, the best of both worlds. But they postponed it. They took it up today. There was this last minute change to this lease that happened. This was a pre-negotiated thing that Commissioner Barrett had been working with the library for, and he went on this long speech about how, this is, there were things I didn't agree with, and, I'm sure there's things that aren't going to make the library happy, but, it's what works best for everyone. The library in part is going to now have to help pay for a new roof for the library, things like that. But the board chair introduced this amendment to change the agreement that they had negotiated to bring back this old termination clause into the contract, which is what the commissioners
The 30 days?
Yeah, the 30 days. That's what they had previously used, where the commissioners can, for any reason or no reason at all, terminate the lease with the library with 30 days notice. He also said that he found 14 deficiencies in the contract that he said makes this worse for the county. He didn't go into detail about that.
But you emailed
I
him.
emailed him, and I did not get a response. I'm trying to see what those deficiencies are, but, we're not really sure. So they ended up passing that form of the contract. It was basically what they negotiated, except including that old termination clause. And it passed 2-1 with Commissioner Barrett, who was the one who actually negotiated this lease in the first place, voting against it because he didn't like that old termination clause.
And so you talked to the library director. How did they react to getting that 30-day clause put back in?
Yeah, she was not happy. Clearly, she said that this was a pre-negotiated thing, and I think the big part of it was that this termination clause was non-negotiable. Like, this was not something they would be okay with having in
because
this lease.
30 days isn't much time to move a library if you need to? Or?
She said that it's not common for commercial leases. She said, it would be kind of wild for, a company like McDonald's or something to have a commercial, have a contract in their lease agreement that says that they could just get kicked out with 30 days notice. That's just kind of wild for commercial property. They need the stability, the library especially. It's really hard to move a library, and they need some stability because they're building a new library right now on land that the library actually owns. So this isn't even, the library's not even going to be in this building forever. Eventually they're going to move out, but they just need that stability right now to do that. I'm currently trying to figure out other county leases that they have to see if this clause is in any of the other ones. I know that one big part of this was that the library is only paying $1 per year for this property, so they're essentially getting it for free from the county. The county also does that for at least one other property. The Grants Pass YMCA is also on county-owned land. I'm trying to figure out what other land is paid for $1 a year, and also if that clause is anywhere in those other contracts too, to see if that's at least common for the county-owned properties, if not common for commercial leases.
Well, it sounds like we know what you're reporting next, but what's happening next for the library?
Yeah, so the library board met last night, and that's part of the reason why we didn't publish a story until now, because I want to get confirmation that they did not approve this lease agreement, as we pretty much expected from what I heard from library director. They did not want this old termination clause in there, so it sounds like they're going to send a counter offer to the commissioners, and then they're just going to have to continue negotiating, I guess, until they don't have that clause in there, because the library is not going to accept that.
So we'll be having this conversation again at some point.
Probably again, yes.
Okay, well, Emma J., you visited the airport this week. What was happening over there? You weren't just leaving town.
No. Senator Wyden was actually getting a tour. The Rogue Valley International Airport in Medford was just renovated using funds he and Senator Merkley secured from the Federal Aviation Administration last year. He got about $7 million in grant money, or just under that. So county and airport officials were kind of showing him around, showing him what the hard work that he and Merkley did accomplished for them.
$7 million sounds like a lot, but not necessarily when it comes to airports.
No.
What actually were they able to get done there?
Nothing that a passenger would notice so far. There were a lot of changes, though, to make it more accessible and safer for the pilots. Wyden kept saying that this was a good place to be in the cockpit because the pre-existing taxiway was extended and 2 more were added. So now there are 3 different routes to the runway. They also expanded the area where idle planes can park, which apparently is called the apron. That's a new fact for me. Anyway, the hope...
You learn something every day on this job.
Exactly. Anyway, the hope is that the increase in space will reduce the amount of time it takes a plane to get from gate to runway and vice versa, starting to reduce those wait times.
So that sounds great for pilots, all that extra space and what have you. But what about the rest of us?
Oh, I know. The passenger serving side of things, both in and outside of the terminal, they will also see an upgrade in the coming years. Officials said that they have big plans to double the amount of passengers that the airport can accommodate by 2042. They are already starting to see that increase in passengers. A lot of people are coming to the Rogue Valley. Part of the way they will be doing that is by adding more gates, ticket counters, and security lines. Construction to the boarding area and baggage claim could be made as soon as early 2027, according to the airport director, Amber Judd. She said the county has been saving for this first phase of construction, but later additions will require state and likely federal assistance in terms of funding. So hopefully Wyden and Merkley can help out again in the future.
Yeah, so that's what the airport wants for sure. Justin, you had a story about the Umpqua Public Transportation District. You've been covering this rural district for a while that's up in Douglas County?
Douglas County, yep.
Yeah, what's new there?
Yeah, I have been covering it for a while. It's an interesting district to cover. So just to remind listeners, last year, basically a group of Douglas County Republican outcasts joined the board. So they had been removed from the executive committee of the county's Republican Party for sort of attacking fellow Republicans. They were kind of on the America First wing of that county Republican Party. Ben Edel was hired as CEO for the district. Previously, he worked as a political consultant and supported a pretty intense campaign in favor of one of the board members, Todd Vaughn, for state senator. And that campaign included, they put up billboards actually accusing Vaughn's rival of having ties to the Chinese Communist Party. This was another Republican.
Yeah.
So you can see why the County Republican Party kind of didn't go for that. Anyways, when Edel joined the district, he was pretty explicit that it would be run as an America First agency in Oregon. And so that's what caught my interest, and that's what led to my first reporting on it.
Well, so when he took over, the agency, the transportation district, and the Umpqua Transportation District wasn't in great shape. Were they?
No. They were facing something like 70 compliance issues. And they were really at risk of losing state and federal funding and closing down, which would be a bummer for riders, especially in rural areas in Oregon like that. A lot of people really rely off that transportation district. But since Edel and his allies took over, the district has actually rebounded. They solved most of those compliance issues. Although in May of this year, most of those new board members, so those allies of Edel, were voted out. They lost their seats, and Edel lost his backing. And the new board this week accepted Edel's resignation. So
that came after its own testy meeting, right?
Yeah. It was. There's been some dramatic meetings, more than you would expect from a transportation district. Those are usually pretty boring. But anyway, so while we have this shakeup, Vaughn, Edel's out. Vaughn, that former board member who lost his race, is actually challenging the results of that election in court. Edel and Vaughn have alleged election fraud without evidence in that race. And Vaughn sued the county clerk and his rival, Natasha Atkinson, in that race. Although the new board did finally certify the results from that May election this week, which was held up as they discussed this court case.
Well, besides that political turmoil you reported this week, the district also talked about their budget and likely cuts. What's going on there?
Yeah, so that change in leadership wasn't even really the most important thing that they talked about this week. So the district hasn't received its federal funds yet, which is about half of its budget. Those have been withheld by the federal government, like elsewhere in the state. And so staff talked about how they're going to likely need to cut routes and lay off staff. Brenda Gordon, a Riddle resident, spoke at public comment. She's 60 years old and disabled.
We have no doctors in this town. We have no way to get to where we need to go without the bus. I understand budgets need to be met, but you can't cut us off.
So you can kind of hear how that's affecting local residents. These cuts are happening across the state. It's not just in Douglas County. We've had stories lately on the Rogue Valley's transportation district. But the board will decide later this week what exactly they'll cut. They're proposing actually to cut the entire southern county line. So anywhere in the south, the yellow line there will be cut likely. But we'll be following that. They'll have an update by the end of this month.
Okay. Well, thank you, Justin. Roman, let's go back to you. You reported on a change in Humboldt County that could lead to darker skies. Tell us what's going on there.
Yeah, the Humboldt County supervisors this week voted on this new ordinance that restricts outdoor lighting in the county, or at least in the areas that are not part of cities like Eureka and Arcata. It's kind of a big a lot of different regulations and stuff.
And this is so you can see the stars, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of different things. It's kind of designed to save energy by not having lights on when you don't need them. Also helping animals that, need the darkness for migration or other things. It was actually interesting because right after I finished this story, I noticed this week the podcast Shortwave from NPR had a episode where they talked about how there's new research that shows that birds' days are getting longer because of light pollution. Their days are essentially an hour longer. Yeah, they start vocalizing 20 minutes earlier in the morning and stop 30 minutes later in the evening, and they don't really know how that's actually affecting birds, but it could impact them by interfering with their sleep or hormonal cycles. So
like all of us, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it impacts me too, but it also does impact actual residents in the county because, sometimes people might have lights that are on and they're outside and that shines into your window while you're trying to sleep. And so it can impact that too.
And this is part of a larger movement, right?
Yeah, this is part of this dark sky movement. If you've heard about it before, you might have heard of like dark sky places.
Yeah.
Those are common in areas where it's really dark, like in Nevada is a really common place.
We have one in Eastern Oregon that's a big area.
Yeah, exactly. These dark sky places are where they're trying to avoid light pollution and trying to bring these benefits. And so there's this whole movement with a lot of individual chapters all across the world that are trying to encourage organizations and municipalities to pass these kind of dark sky ordinances to restrict the lighting and just keep things darker to improve things.
So in Humboldt County, what does this mean there? Are you going to have to get blackout curtains, turn off all the street lights?
Yeah, it won't affect your indoor lights, luckily, just outdoor stuff. But there are restrictions in terms of like what kinds of lights can be used. They're restricting a lot of those older kinds of street lights that are halogen type bulbs and stuff. They're going to require LED bulbs essentially, but also a lot of it is about being shielded. So the light will have to be protected from shining upward. It'll only be able to shine exactly where it's needed. So it's going to have a lot more restrictions on that, and also like having motion detectors to have the light only turn on when someone's moving by it.
That's what really wakes me up. Okay, well, thank you, Roman. That's it for the debrief this week. Thanks for listening. You can reach the newsroom with comments on our coverage and suggestions for things we should cover in the future through our news tip line. That's on our website at ijpr.org. And you can find this program and more at jeffexchange.org or on your favorite podcast platform.